You are listening to the Tricorder transmissions. And now, here are Jeff and Ian.
Hey everybody, and thanks again for beaming aboard the Tricorder transmissions. We are back today with our coverage of Gold Key Comics, issue number 34, the Psychocrystals. And yes, that is one word, Psychocrystals. Ian, by the way, my friend Ian, he's here with me as always, and I'm Jeff Hewlett. It's been a little while since we recorded, so give us a little break here. It kind of screwed up our intro. Ian, how are you?
I'm doing great. You?
I'm doing okay. It's been a long couple. We're leading right up to the holidays here, and it's been kind of hectic at work. And we haven't recorded in a couple weeks. We've both been having some time off here, and kind of getting back in the saddle again is proving to be difficult.
Yeah, but here we are again.
Yes, we are. And you know what? This is funny because we had this thing 2 issues ago, I think. It was issue 32, The Animal People, where I could not find any information on who wrote it. And once again, that happened with this issue. None of my sources actually said who the writer was, so I wasn't sure. Were you able to find anything?
Yeah. So turns out the Memory Alpha page for the entire Star Trek Whitman series, they call it instead of Gold Key.
Oh.
Has a table.
Really?
And the table lists the issue number, the name, like the title of the issue, the star date, what decade it was in, the publication date, the writer, and the artist. The only thing it doesn't include is the cover artist, who in this case, again, is George Wilson. But for both the Animal People and this issue, they were both Arnold Drake.
Wow, that surprises me. Wow, I'm amazed that it was Arnold Drake. Oh, well, good. I'm glad to know that. It's funny because I checked Memory Alpha, but I guess I went directly to the comic page.
Right, and it's not listed there.
Yeah, for some reason it wasn't listed there. And I checked the other source that I have, and it wasn't listed. It says unknown on that one too, and I couldn't find anything.
Was that the it's like a Gold Key fan page?
Yeah, yep, that one.
Yeah, I know
what I'm talking
I know
about.
the
It's
one.
Yellow
Yep.
background. Yeah, that one.
Yes.
And that says unknown. So I couldn't find a word about it. So I'm amazed. Usually Memory Alpha is really good with this stuff. I'm surprised they have the author information one place, but not in the actual comics page.
Yeah, and one thing that does kind of get my spidey sense tingling on it is there's no citations, right? We basically just have to take their word for it because it's not listed in the issue itself, which would be like the primary source.
Yeah, that is
interesting. As far as we know, that's the only place where that name appears. So, but Arnold Drake was very prolific. He wrote, about 20 issues or something like that. So I'm willing to accept that they were correct here on the Memory Alpha page.
Yeah, I'm willing to accept that as well, because he did write many other issues, so chances are that is correct. So we'll go with Arnold Drake on this one. Thanks for finding that. I'm glad that we now know. And now if we find any more issues in the future that are unknown, we know where to go to find out who the author might actually be.
Absolutely.
So good find. And of course, our artist is still our buddy Alberto Giolitti. And of course, Ian already said the cover art was George Wilson. This issue was published in October of 1975, the same month that had my my first birthday in it.
Wow.
I turned 1 when this comic came out. So this is quite a while. This is 41 years ago. And 26 pages, and we are starting with stardate 1927.4. 4. And as we said, this is called the Psychocrystals. And we'll jump into talking about the cover here. And God, there's so much to say about this cover, Ian. I think this, to me, is another one of George Wilson's fine works.
Oh, absolutely.
I love this cover. The first thing that I noticed on this cover, and I don't know if this jumped out to you immediately either, but you've got this crystalline dragon on the left side that is being shot by a ray of light from a crystal that Spock is holding. Its body is made of a magenta reddish colored crystal, but its head is actually a fleshy lizard head. Its head is not made of crystal. It's actually like a flesh and bone head
with squishy eyes and a squishy tongue. And probably calcium teeth and
exactly. But now I'm gonna, spoiler alert, hold your ears if you don't want to be spoiled. Once you get into the issue, there are crystalline characters whose bodies and heads are made of crystal. So it struck me as odd that this dragon's head was organic, but yet the rest of its body was made of crystal. It looks really cool, though.
It does, but one other thing that I would point out that, again, a spoiler, is that the biological head that's seen in the cover is not present on the creature in the comic, which we will see later on.
Exactly. And the dragon, well, since we're doing spoilers, the dragon in the comic also has a horn on its head, whereas this one is more of a serpent's type head on the cover. And I have to say, I love the fangs on that.
Oh, yeah.
What a great job.
It's just, I would love to see this guy just do, straight fantasy work.
Totally.
Have him tackle an actual dragon. You know what I mean? It would look amazing.
Yeah, it really looks like he's got that form down, because that's one of the coolest dragon heads I think I've seen in a while.
Totally, especially with the lighting on it and everything.
Yeah. The shadow work and lighting is fantastic on it, because the lighting, of course, is coming from not only the ambient light, but the light that is being shown from this giant crystal that Spock is holding, and you can see how the shading on the dragon's head gets darker on the top, but is very bright on the bottom where the light is hitting. So, I mean, that's some extra detail that, it didn't necessarily, and it also reflects on the crystals around the dragon's neck as well.
Yeah.
So just that extra bit of accent work just makes this so brilliant. What a great cover.
Yeah, it is great. I noticed Kirk, how to say this charitably, he doesn't look like Kirk.
He doesn't, no.
But he looks real.
He does.
Does that make sense?
He does. You're right. He does definitely look well drawn. He looks real. But I had to actually zoom in on this Kirk face to see whether or not he had a mustache or that was just the way it was shaded. It looked like he had a mustache when it's fully zoomed to the full cover, but when I zoom in, I can clearly see that he doesn't. But just the shading and the skin tone around the lip, when it's kind of smaller on the page, looked kind of like a mustache to me, and I immediately thought that it wasn't Kirk. But later we'll find out that it is. Again, spoiler alert.
Turns out.
So, actually, great artwork on their uniforms. By the way, the boots look great. The pants look great. The shirts are really good. Spock's ears are wonderful, and his hair is great. Even though his face doesn't look like an Nimoy, you know what? They both look younger to me on the cover than they actually are. This kind of looks like a young Spock to me. Yeah,
it does. I would probably say the opposite on the Kirk, though. He kind of seems a little older to me, but I don't know. It's kind of hard to say because it's obviously not, a likeness of Shatner anyway.
Yeah, I guess that's one of the things about these, that the covers consistently don't do a good job at the likenesses. And I wonder if that was George Wilson just not having reference material, or he wasn't allowed to draw the correct likeness. I know we've had likeness issues with licensing in the past. I know there's been a lot of action figures that I've seen that were, supposed to be Kirk, but didn't look a damn thing like Shatner.
Right.
I have a couple Diamond Select figures that don't look a thing like Shatner, and I have some that do. So it's very strange. But another positive thing about this, I love the cave background.
Yes.
What a great job! I mean, again, a lot of detail that may not have been necessary to draw or to paint. But he went ahead and did a ton of detail on those rocks, especially in the upper right, underneath the word Trek. I mean, that looks incredible that kind of, back there.
Well, I guess it's all a cave. It almost seems like a cave entrance on that wall.
Yeah, either that or
like it's like an archway or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep. And there's that area that looks as if there's got water running, or water has run down it and eroded it into those step-like formations back there. But fantastic work.
Yeah, I tell you, I really like George Wilson's work. Like, I am tempted to just start tracking down all of the stuff that he did just to see it.
Yeah, I'm tempted to see if he's got a book out or anything with a lot of his artwork in it. I don't know what the rights would be like to amass all of those covers from different comic companies, but it would be pretty cool if you could get just a kind of a large collection of all of his works across many different comics.
Totally.
Yeah, so there's another. This is interesting. The tagline at the bottom of the page, and I remarked that Psychocrystals is one word, but interestingly enough, it says the Psychocrystals they glitter with death. Now, the word Psychocrystals is one word, but they capitalize both the P and the C.
Yeah, so, it's camel cased.
Yeah, it's interesting that they decided to do that. I expect to see like a little trademark symbol
right
after it.
And in fact, I don't want to get too far ahead, but on the very first page, the splash page where they've got the title card, they even made Psychocrystals look like a logo for something that could have even been its own comic.
Maybe this was going to be Gene Roddenberry's second merchandising attempt. They would sell a Psychocrystal and the Idic.
Yeah, or maybe it was another thing like Assignment Earth, where it was like a a kind of shadow pilot.
Yeah, great idea. But you can see clearly on this cover, you can see Spock holding what may very well be a Psychocrystal, and he's shooting a laser beam out of it. But imagine if they had sold that; it almost looks like a crystal plate or something, like a piece of lens.
Yeah, it does.
Like some kind of junk you give somebody as a Christmas gift. You don't know what to get them. You go to a housewarming party and you get them a Psychocrystal.
Oh, Psychocrystals, that's my favorite.
They go and put it in the other room, and there's like 25 other Psychocrystals that everybody else gave them. You think you're unique, but you're not. Anything else you want to say about this cover before we move on?
The only thing that I would point out is that I was a little confused at first by the term Psychocrystals. And the only thing that I'm going to say is that it would appear that the psycho is not like in the Alfred Hitchcock movie sense of the word.
Correct. Yes,
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. That's not too spoilery. So yeah, speaking of spoilers, we are going to start talking about the issue proper here in a second. So we'll give all of you out there in listener land a chance to pause us or put us on hold. And if you want to go read the issue without hearing us talk about it first, feel free to do that and then come back. If you want to continue with us, we are going to start talking about the teaser page for this issue in 3, 2, 1. So as Ian said a minute ago, there is a box in the upper left of this that shows the title of the issue written in a completely different way than it's written on the cover. It does actually looks like some sort of a toy logo,
right?
Or something. It makes me think of like Black Star. Remember the Black Star toys?
Oh yes.
Yeah, this is it. It says Star Trek: The Psychocrystals, and Psychocrystals is written where the letters are all in uppercase. It's flat across the top, but there's an arch across the bottom of the letters, so it gets smaller, and then it gets wider and thinner and wider again, leaving a strange gap underneath it. In that, or it looks like a strange amount of. It's like a weird bit of blank space under there. It almost looks like they should have made the text box kind of fit with the arch of the letters.
I would agree with that, especially because you see the horn on the dragon there, for want of a better term for it. I'm not going to call it a dragon, pokes up into it. And if they had made that little curve there, then it would have just not overlapped it at all. And I think you're right.
You know, that's a great point, because the way that the text box falls in the page, and the fact that the dragon's in the foreground and the text box is in the quote-unquote background behind the dragon, and parts of the dragon are overlapping it, it almost puts that text box into the image itself. It almost makes it look like it's like a billboard in the background or something.
And that's why the Enterprise crew there are all really stunned, is they're like, what? Star Trek? What is that?
There's an ad flashing behind that dragon. So yeah, the dragon in this image here, we assume is the same dragon that was on the cover page, but its entire body is now green. It's not red. The head is now looks more crystalline to me. It's not a flesh head. The entire body is made of jagged crystals, except the tongue.
Yeah, except the tongue.
The tongue is still pink or red and looks flexible. So we've got this dragon. It looks like it's kind of busting through a cave wall like the Kool-Aid Man.
I was just going to say that. Yes.
Sorry. And in the foreground, this is interesting to me. You've got two Enterprise crew members, one who I assume is Kirk, and the other, which likely is Scotty, because he's in a red shirt. He's got the Scotty haircut.
A red shirt, and he's got like... Have you noticed that Scotty in the Gold Key has a tendency to just have these weird kind of Great Scott, but in space exclamations?
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, Ian is correct. If you'd like to read Scotty's quote, feel free.
I'm not going to attempt a Scottish accent because...
Okay. No points for you. I'll read it in just a plain... actually, you know what? Let me start off with the text box in the upper right-hand corner that sets the stage for this. And by the way, in the foreground, in front of the two Enterprise crew members, there are several... Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 beings that are humanoid in form, but are made of crystals. So in the upper right, there's a text box here. It says, an innocent scientific expedition becomes a subterranean nightmare when Captain Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise find themselves racing against the clock of their own executions. So, Ian, I'll cut you a deal. I'll read Scotty's line if you do the dragon sound effect.
All right.
Okay, so Scotty is saying he's witnessing this scene, and he is in a stunned looking stance. He looks as if he's thinking about maybe running away. He's kind of hunched a little bit, his knees are bent, and he's observing this dragon busting through the wall, and he says, "Great moons of Mars, we're trapped on a world of poets and harp players with weapons no better than toothpicks against a beast like that."
And then the dragon says, "Oh yeah." Oh wait, no. He says, "Yak."
So "yak" may actually be "oh yeah" in dragon language.
It might be.
So we don't know.
So I do want to point out, because you've got those 8 people, crystal people things, but you've got a 9th who is just, while everyone else is throwing spears, it looks like, at the dragon, this 9th dude looks like he's just painting. He's just sat down and painting.
Yeah, and on the opposite side of the painting, there's one sitting with a harp in his hand or some sort of musical instrument.
Yeah.
So it looks like a bunch of hippie crystal people.
Right. Which, I mean, you know, if you're going to be crystal people, you might as well be hippies, right?
Yeah. For sure. Now, something that I didn't pick up on until just now about this is that obviously the dragon is made of crystal and the people are made of crystal, and they're throwing spears at the dragon. How would those spears have any effect on a solid crystal being like that? It just
right.
They seem it would be very ineffective. Yeah, I don't know. So let's see. I thought to myself that the crystal dragon looked almost Godzilla-esque, but the head and neck are a little different.
Yeah, it's almost like that that American Godzilla that came out a few years ago.
Oh, I avoided that one. I love Godzilla, but I didn't go see that one. I was ruined after the Matthew Broderick one.
Oh God, yeah. But yeah, it definitely does have a longer neck, but he's got like the kind of squat body of Godzilla, with the arms and legs and tail and everything.
Yeah, he definitely does not have T-Rex arms.
No,
those are actual serious arms.
Yeah, you want to avoid those.
Yes, no question. And he looks almost like a cross between Godzilla and more of a serpent type lizard.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, which is cool, right?
Yeah.
You don't want it to just look exactly like something else.
Yeah, you don't want it to just be like an aped version of Godzilla just stuck into a Star Trek comic.
Right.
Yeah. So, did you notice that this kind of stuck out to me? And I guess we'll find out a little bit more about this guy shortly. But you notice that all the crystal people are pretty much one color all throughout their body, except for this one guy here in right next to Scotty or in front of Scotty. Yeah. He is 4 different colors of crystal. He's counting transparent as a color, right? Red, green, and black, and transparent. He's also wearing some sort of a headband.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
are we to expect that he's the leader? Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. In my headcanon, the only thing is that indicated to me that he was wearing clothing while everyone else was naked.
Oh, wow. Oh, I like that. I didn't even think about it. So now that changes my perspective on this teaser page. Now there's a naked painter, a naked harp player, and the rest of them are frolicking around in the nude, except maybe this other guy, the one that's kind of a bluish green, like look right above Scotty's head. Yeah. That one's wearing underpants.
Yep.
He's got black crystal underpants on. Maybe he was in the middle of taking them off when the dragon busted in.
It's like, dragon, better get naked.
Yeah. Maybe this is another pleasure planet. Who knows? Oh, man.
I don't know.
And
but sorry, what were you going to say?
Again, another non-scientific question. I mean, you can't apply any sort of logic or science to this because these are aliens, but what do you think holds their joints together?
Yeah, I was going to save this till a little later, but that was my only main criticism with the art in this issue is the way that he drew these crystal people. Especially being crystal, you would have a huge latitude to go with.
Oh, absolutely.
And the fact that there are these weird crystal like humanoids, it just didn't seem odd. And then especially those joints just, like they look like they're coming down to a point.
Mm-hmm.
Like the end of the tip of a pencil.
Yeah.
And that is just connecting to the other tip of a and that's just connecting to the other tip of a pencil on the opposite appendage part. And that just does not seem. I mean, while you would have a lot of range of motion, it doesn't seem very sturdy at all, and definitely not crystal-like.
No, not at all. I could see if these were like magnet people, and they were joined together by magnetism. But yeah, it was. I kind of gave it a pass because they're aliens. We don't know.
Sure.
I love the fact that they went there, and that they have beings made of crystal, and I mean they are humanoid in form, but this kind of rides the line of my non-humanoid alien rule, and giving the issue or episode an automatic thumbs up for having the stones to have a non-humanoid alien. These are close enough in my book that I was kind of happy with it. I was like, hey, great. They're not cavemen. Thank God. They're not bald white guys.
Right. Yes.
They're actually something a little bit different. So I like the approach. I like the fact that, again, they're using the medium to do something different that we wouldn't have seen on the show. So
yeah, I agree with you there. I just kind of wish that Gia Liddy had taken it a little further.
Yeah. Me too. I do too. But well, maybe down the road, maybe he'll bring more crystalline aliens back. And one thing I will say, I will flip this card now. This is a little bit of a spoiler for the rest of the issue. I was a little disappointed to find out that these weren't like the distant relatives of the crystalline entity. I was kind of hoping that they might have been, but didn't work out.
I mean, in fairness, that episode came out 13 years later or 12 years later.
But the Borg, were foretold by the mummies of H7. So,
true.
Gold Key can define more future canon.
That's true.
Anything else you want to say about this teaser page before we start up?
No, I want to get into it. I've got a lot to say on this first section.
Oh boy, so do I. Okay, so we are starting here on page 3 of the digital version of the comic, and we find we join the Enterprise crew. They are on a routine mineral and biological survey in a place called Space Sector 179, Subsector 23C. So the So they're flying around and they detect some what Spock calls complicated crystals on a planet that they call Alpha 23C. So Spock says they may be valuable and that we may want to claim them for research and potentially industry. So of course Spock grabs a hold of Scotty and Dr. McCoy and decides to beam down to the surface to investigate the situation. And Spock stays behind on the ship to start a topographical survey of the planet. Okay, hold on. And Mr. Spock stays behind to start a topographical survey. And the 3 crew members beam down, and once they get to the surface, they are overcome by a strange feeling of nausea. Dr. McCoy suggests that Scotty check the transporters for malfunctions when they get back to the ship, and Kirk seconds that order and says, I don't relish the idea of being scrambled by a malfunctioning transporter, which I would have thought should have been McCoy's line, but this is Gold Key. So the 3 of them set off to look for some of these crystals, and they see a bunch of large crystal outcroppings and a large plateau, and that seems to be in their way. And Kirk orders Scotty to climb up over the plateau and says that he and McCoy will split up and take the left and the right paths around the base, and they'll meet up on the other side. So while climbing up the plateau, Scotty finds quite a large chunk of crystal with a lot of large flat facets on it, and he decides that he is going to pull out his Starfleet issue pickaxe and chop off some samples, one for Mr. Spock's geological survey, and the other for apparently a lady friend that he has on a Jupiter colony. So as Scotty wields the pickaxe and begins to swing it, the crystal that he's about to chip a piece off of fires a beam of light at him, which knocks the pickaxe out of his hand and causes him some sort of pain, but doesn't otherwise injure him at all. Scotty decides to move in closer, and as he's looking at the crystal, he sees a vision or an image starting to form, and it is a Scottish Highlander riding a horse, and it's actually Scotty. So he's realizing he's seeing a vision of himself, but it's kind of like a deep wish of his. He always wanted to be an adventurer, so somehow this crystal is conjuring images from Scotty's subconscious and manifesting them to him. And he starts to look around. There's some other crystals there, and he sees another vision. This time he sees a younger man who is being scared by a witch, a huge, gigantic witch. And Scotty realizes,
Macbeth.
This is one of his childhood fears that's lingered on into his adulthood. He's never been able to get over his fear of witches, and he keeps moving around, and he's seeing more visions, and he's seeing things in a third crystal. He's seeing like a dark side of himself, and he's starting to lose his mind. He's starting to feel like he's going kind of crazy, and he finally overloads and collapses on the ground and begins to scream. Fortunately, Kirk in the distance hears Scotty and starts to race backwards up the plateau to find out what's going on. So we're going to stop here. This is page 8 that we're stopping on. So we'll rewind here and go back to the first page. And there's a captain's log here that I'll really quickly read. I kind of summarized it, but the captain's log actually says, Captain's log stardate 1927.4, on routine mineral and biological survey of space sector 179 subsector 23C. Very short captain's log as compared to what we've seen in prior issues, but really cool shot of the bridge here.
Yeah, that is straight up the bridge. You can even see the little astrogator thing in between Scotty and Sulu. I assume they're Scotty and Sulu, or Scotty and Sulu. Jeez. Chekhov and Sulu. No, really, guys. I've watched Star Trek before. I promise. Like they've got the railing down. They've got the whole thing. I mean, it looks like the bridge.
Yeah, super cool angle too. This is not an angle that we see on the show much. Usually, we see the screen from straight on. Yeah,
like this would be Uhura's view, looking towards the center of the bridge.
If you ever wanted to know what Uhura saw, this is the panel to look at.
Indeed. So I've got a couple things here.
Oh, so do I.
The very first one that I wanted to mention was that I thought it was kind of interesting how they're like, we're in space sector 179 subsector 23C, and then Spock says in his dialogue that they're looking at planet Alpha 23C, which indicates, right, that there's a relation between, the planet and the sector in terms of their nomenclature. And I just thought that was interesting. We don't see
I took it
a whole lot of that.
Yeah, this is not something you see in Gold Key very often. Good point. Usually it seems like they're disconnected, or they're going for a weird space sector name or strange planet names. I'll throw out planet question mark again.
Yep.
Yes, we always go to planet question mark. And no, good one. And I'll actually throw something else in on this first panel, and I'll say this started off the comic on a really bad foot for me. Now, Spock is pointing out there's an image of the planet on the screen, and Spock says, and radio spectroanalysis shows planet Alpha 23C to be low in base metals but high in some of the rare minerals useful in our technology. Now, Spock is saying things that I, as a reader, without any sort of scientific knowledge, can pretty easily understand. Now, Scotty says, and I quote, "Aw, come on, Mon. Would you mind translating that for us common folk? Dude, the chief engineer can't even understand that? That really threw me off. That's totally... I mean, I could see McCoy saying that and not understanding Spock's, quasi-scientific jargon, but this is the chief engineer. He should know what all this stuff means.
Every engineer in the modern day, at least, has to take, at the very least, they don't have to get into organic chemistry, although many of them do, but they have to at least take general chemistry, right? So you would know what metals are. You would know, like, he's not saying anything weird there. Even you might think, oh, maybe he was put off by radio spectroanalysis. Like,
no, I don't think
in general chemistry, like chemistry 161 here in the United States, at least, everyone does spectral analysis. You use like a little, what were they called? Mass chromatographer.
Nice.
And that's what that does as a spectral analysis. Like it uses the light. It just.
But even that,
there's
even
just
if
so much.
Scotty didn't know what spectroanalysis was, he makes it sound like he doesn't understand any of what Spock just said, and I just find that highly suspect. And I almost feel that should have been a Dr. McCoy line minus the Scottish, quasi-Scottish accent.
Right, except that, like, doctors have to go all the way up through organic chemistry.
That's true.
So it's like, come on.
Yeah, maybe. I would have been a little more lenient though, if it was Mr.
Just because he tends to be more cantankerous anyway.
Yeah, he might have been messing with Spock.
Yeah.
But, real quick, I know you have something else you want to say. I found it really cool though that Kirk calls McCoy Bones in the third panel.
Yeah,
on this
we don't see that a lot.
Yeah, no, that I think I've seen it maybe in one or two other Gold Key issues, and we're in issue 34 now, so definitely not a common thing at this point in Gold Key.
So the other thing that I wanted to point out is that this is probably, on the fourth panel, the most accurate transporter room we've seen so far. Both the room itself and the console look pretty darn close.
Good call. Yeah, I think the only thing that I would say is really off is the door, the piece of the door that you see.
Yeah.
Everything else, pretty good. Even the little red alert light that's sticking up from the console. The only thing that I would question about this is, why is Mr. Spock operating the transporter? Shouldn't they have somebody for that? Shouldn't Spock be doing his topographical survey at this point? Why is he going to the transporter room? Is there the only 4 people on the ship?
Yeah, where's Mr. Kyle?
Yeah, come on, man. At least draw Mr. Kyle in there. I know you have to have him there for that line of dialogue, but
right,
we have to set up what's about to happen, and Spock is making a remark that there are no life forms as we know them, but caution is always most logical. So, we need Spock there to kind of set up exactly what's going to happen here in a couple pages with the no life forms as we know them, quote unquote.
It's life, Jim, but not as we know it.
Not as we know it. Not as we know it. Yeah, a little obscure song reference there. So, anything else about this page before we continue on to subsequent pages?
No, because boy, I have more to say about the next page.
Yeah, yep, I'm there with you. So next page, I love this, and we've remarked about this on some other Gold Keys in the past, that you've got the white outline around the landing party as they're beaming down. So this is supposed to indicate that they're kind of mid transport,
right?
Which is cool. But and again, they're moving though while they're mid transport and talking. So
yeah, it's much more like the movie Transporters.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, this is definitely less TOS like, but they're already feeling the effects of transporting before they're completely materialized.
Yeah, and there's just one thing that's just odd about it. Like, Scotty's rattling off his symptoms, and he says, "I'm that woozy." headache, nausea. Never felt that before. Like, really, Scotty? You've never had a headache or an upset stomach? Never?
And you know what makes that even less believable is he's probably the most consummate drinker on the Enterprise.
Exactly.
I would bet money he's had headaches and nausea before.
I'm pretty sure we can even point to episodes in the series where he has had.
Oh my god!
Maybe not both at the same time, but
yeah. How about wasn't it by any other name where he got totally plastered with that alien guy as they were trying to take back
with
the
the
ship?
Andromedan.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I mean he had to get a hangover then. He was sweating. His hair was plastered to his head. I mean, they killed that entire bottle.
Yeah.
You know,
I think, did it.
yeah, I think he was pretty hosed. But and I God, that quasi accent is terrible. He says Hootman. Yeah. What is that? Oh, what does that even mean? Hootman. Who says that?
Hootman. I don't know, but maybe I should start.
Yeah, maybe you can coin that or recoin it.
And then this was just like a thing that struck me as weird, right? Is that in that first panel, you've got McCoy saying, "You're right, Scotty. You ought to inspect the transporter when we get back," and then it's got like the M dash there to indicate it's stopping here, but going to continue into the next panel, which it does. The first word balloon starts with an M dash and says, "Or one of these trips, we're going to wind up wearing a nose for a kneecap," which sounds like exactly like the continuation of the thought that McCoy had.
Yeah, but it's not.
Except it's coming out of Scotty's mouth, which is like, That just struck me as a little weird.
With no accent. Yeah. No mons in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's as weird as the dash between mal and functioning.
Nice. That is weird. That did kind of throw me for a loop. I had to go back and read the first panel again to see who was talking in the first one.
Yeah.
And try to line it up. And Kirk has a strange line here that I thought should have been a McCoy line too, where he says that I don't like the idea of being scrambled by a malfunction. That there's that mal dash functioning transporter. Definitely felt like something McCoy should have said and transferred over into this. Well, then again, I mean, a lot of things didn't make it from the show into Gold Key at this point.
True.
So not surprising.
But it's like, I mean, of course the kind of McCoy transporter moment is, the beginning of Star Trek, the motion picture, but he was very uncomfortable with the transporter many other times throughout the series, even though he used it a hell of a lot more regularly in the series than he did in the movies. But that was just sort of his thing. Scotty was, transporter phobic. Or not Scotty, sorry, McCoy. So it just seems weird that, that it's kind of a theme that I'm going to kind of pick on in these next few pages, but there's a lot of kind of character moments that seem like they're assigned to the wrong characters. And this was the first one.
I agree. And, well, there's another one in the next panel, but I don't know. This is one of those moments that I don't think should have even existed in the first place. So there's the three landing party crew members. So we have Kirk, McCoy, and Scotty walking in a single file line, but they're all kind of shaded in shadow, and you can see that Kirk is clearly the first one, but the other two it's difficult to see who's who. So I don't know, but either one, whichever one is actually saying this line of dialogue, I have a problem with for different reasons. So the last person in the line of people says, this could be McCoy or this could be Scotty. There's no accent, so maybe it's McCoy, but then again, Scotty didn't have an accent in the previous panel, so don't know. So the line of dialogue says, since the air is breathable, how come the place is barren of life, Captain? And Kirk replies, "It takes more than oxygen to support life, carbon, nitrogen, and so forth." Now, it why would the Doctor or Scotty not understand that it takes more than breathable air for life to exist? And number two, why would they ask Kirk that question as if he's this fountain of knowledge that he can answer anything? It just seems so weird to me.
Yeah. Especially consider whether it's McCoy or Scotty. Once again, they've both taken chemistry, right? But that's the kind of question. So I'm assuming the person asking it is Scotty.
I was too.
And McCoy is just left out of the picture, right? Like, even though that is completely a question that you would want to ask McCoy.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's about the life sciences. What is medicine? It's life sciences, and it's, like oxygen. Okay. Yeah. Obviously it's naturally occurring. We can go to the periodic table and sure enough, it's one of the most common elements in the entire universe. Mm-hmm. But our atmosphere only became not dominant, because nitrogen is the dominant chemical in the atmosphere here on Earth, but like it was very oxygen poor before. Oh boy, if I'm remembering my biology right, it was like cyanobacteria early on in the Earth's history that they would take carbon dioxide and then they would convert that into oxygen, and that was what caused like the first mass extinction. Was that the atmosphere got radically changed, and a whole bunch of the carbon dioxide got sucked out and a whole lot of oxygen got pumped in, and suddenly, all these bacteria and stuff didn't have breathable air anymore. And so it's like, that's why, we look at Mars and we think, well, there is a very good chance that there may have been life early on in its thing, because, why is Mars red? Well, it's a small planet, so all the iron didn't, sink into the core like it did here on Earth. And so the redness comes from oxygen that interacted with the iron, forming iron oxide known as rust. And that's why it gets its reddish color. And so that's, so we look at oxygen as being a signifier, oxygen in an atmosphere, I should say, as being a signifier of life being present, at least at some point. And so it is a perfectly reasonable question that he's asking. Since the air is breathable, how come the place is barren of life? But he's asking the wrong question, and then the answer is, it's close. I'll A+ for effort. You do need carbon, nitrogen. Yeah, you do need some of that for some life. He left out hydrogen, but you can probably assume that hydrogen is aplenty on the planet there. I don't know. It's just, it is very obvious that Arnold Drake didn't take chemistry. Let me just leave it at that.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. So, last panel. Couple things. Number one, these are really poorly designed backpacks they're wearing. They do not look ergonomically viable to me. They look comfortable. Almost like they're very uncomfortable. They look almost like they'd have 6-packs in them. Mm-hmm. They almost look like coolers.
Exactly.
In a way. They hang really low on the back. They look like they're made of leather, I guess, of some sort. Yeah. The straps are super thin. Kirk's looks almost as if it's about to fall off. Definitely not good for climbing a plateau.
No.
Yeah. And what I didn't understand this line of Kirk's where he commands Scotty to climb up the plateau. He says, you're the best rock eater, Scotty, so you climb the plateau. I tried to Google that term, and it didn't...
Came up empty.
Yeah, totally empty. And so I guess Arnold Drake made that up. Is it a nickname? But it's just that you're the best, quote, rock dash eater, unquote. Now,
yeah, it's I don't know, maybe it's just my modern brain trying to parse it, but it seems to me that the closest you could be is someone who, like, eats rocks in the sense that, say if you fall off a bike, you bit it.
Yeah, no,
Right?
that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, if you maybe if it was a nickname, he's Rock Eater because he always falls when he's trying to climb rocks. He's always eating rocks, right?
Exactly.
But other than that, I don't know.
Yeah, and this is another one of those things. I mean, granted, rock climbing wasn't really identified as a Kirk thing until Star Trek V, but it still struck me as like, well, shouldn't that have been Kirk? He's the one who's like actually the best rock eater, if you're gonna use that term.
True. Yeah.
Right. So why didn't he go up?
The free climb El Capitan.
Yeah. And we don't mean the Macintosh operating system.
No. And the record was in no danger of being broken.
No.
Oh God, I'm weird. And there's really no explanation or reasoning or rationale given as to why they're splitting up. That kind of bugged me. You're on the surface of an alien planet with no security with you. The captain, the ship's doctor, and the chief engineer, and you're
another ill-advised away party.
Yeah, and they're not sticking together. Okay, I can see if the three of them stuck together, all right, you can make the argument that there's some safety in numbers. But now you're splitting up, and you're sending Scotty and Dr. McCoy completely out of eye shot, and you're putting them in places where they're not easily accessible if something were to go wrong. So it just seems like a really questionable move on Kirk's part. I know we nitpick this all the time, but this just seems super dangerous to me after Spock already warned them about there possibly being life not as we know it on this planet.
Yeah. And I mean, even think back to the original series, right? Shore Leave, the episode. Everyone, if I'm remembering correctly, with the exception of Sulu, they were all using the buddy system. So even though they all split up, there was still at least two of them, with the exception of Sulu.
Pretty much. Yeah, so this kind of flies in the face of that.
And of course...
Go ahead, sorry.
Of course, it does give Scotty a really interesting character moment.
It certainly does, as we see on the next page here, as he's making his ascent up a not very steep-looking rock face. So maybe he didn't need to be as good of a rock eater. So I don't know if there's a thought bubble here over Scotty where he's reliving some of Kirk's dialogue saying you're the best rock eater, Scotty, so you climb the plateau. So I guess... And he says out loud... Sometimes I wish I didn't have that much goat in me.
Is that like a Scottish joke? I don't get it.
Yeah, it could be.
Do they have goats in Scotland? I don't even know.
Good question. They have them in Ireland. So I mean, not too far away. So maybe they could cross the border legally.
Yeah.
So Scotty starts to telegraph everything he's doing again.
Yep. Chief exposition here.
Yeah, chief, and Starfleet issue pickaxes. Where? I don't know. That seems really strange to me. That he'd have an actual physical pickaxe, especially when in the past we've seen them phaser off pieces of rocks. You don't really need the pickaxe. He's got a phaser right there on his belt, on his leg rather. He could just whip that out and just shoot off a piece of the crystal. But
yeah, and although I did like Jupiter Colony 5, the reference to that, it made me wonder, like, is it an orbiting colony, or is it on one of like the Galilean moons, or one of the other moons of Jupiter? Where is it?
I don't know. I do not
Heck,
know.
maybe it's even in the atmosphere of Jupiter. I don't know.
There you go.
That would be really tough, but it's Star Trek. They've got future stuff.
Maybe a an orbital space station, possibly.
Yeah,
on Jupiter. Yeah,
could have been.
There could be 5 of them, and she lives on the 5th.
There could very well be. Yeah, but I really appreciated that that reference.
Yeah, and now we know that Scotty's got at least some sort of a female friend that he's thinking of.
A little lady, as he calls him, which, boy, I'm glad he brought a pickaxe, because if he was just going to pick up that giant crystal and put a chain around it, to turn into a necklace, I feel like that that would have been maybe a bit excessive.
Yeah, or an earring, or maybe a huge engagement ring.
Right.
But as we said, he's unsuccessful in breaking off a piece of this. Now, on the next page, we see the crystal showing these images to Scotty. And the first one we see is that Highlander image. You've got a guy with a sword in his hand, and he's felled another opponent there.
With a kilt and tartan and all that stuff. Yeah,
it's no joke. And he goes on to see a guy on horseback. And then this was weird to me. The third vision, where he sees the childlike Scotty himself as a young kid, there's a block in the picture with a B on one side, a letter B, and a number 2 on the other side. What kind of block is that? That's so weird to me. And why is it there in the first place? Is the block there to try to tell us that that's a child? Is this supposed to indicate that it's a toy, or it's awful big?
That was the only thing that I could figure. It seems like one of those letter blocks, that you had as a kid, but it's way too big. I just don't know.
Now, I don't recall my letter blocks mixing letters and numbers on the same block.
No, they were only letters, right?
Right. That really wouldn't. I mean, what would you do with them if they mixed letters and numbers and roll them up? And I don't know. I wouldn't know how you would play a game with those or use them.
Maybe it's because Scotty is like such an intelligent engineer. Maybe the B is referring to like a variable, and they're like algebra blocks.
Wait a minute. I'll challenge that theory on the next page.
Before we go there,
but hold on a moment. There's more to talk about. But hold that thought. All I can say, I'll say one more thing, and then you can take over. Thank God that Scotty was not on the away team when in Cat's Paw. That would have been a disaster. Total disaster.
Yeah.
So, okay, your turn. Go ahead.
Well, so, I was talking before about how there seemed to be a lot of kind of character traits ascribed to the wrong characters. Mm-hmm. And in this page, crap, I don't have access to the page numbers, but the one where Scotty says, well, a wee part of me anyway, the part that wants to ride off on my horse in all directions. So, obviously it was, another 20 years when we find out that, a little less than 20 years that we find out that it's Kirk who's the horse guy. And, obviously, like, it's not like you have to have only one person per group who's into horses, right? Like I like horses. That doesn't mean that, therefore you can't ride horses. You know what I mean?
And didn't Captain Pike like horses too?
Yeah, he did. but it's just like we never got any indication that Scotty was into horses, and just 30, 40 years of hindsight later, we learned that that's kind of Kirk's thing.
Mm-hmm. And cooking
so
eggs.
So it's just the kind of thing where, like Kirk was the rock climber, so he should have gone up the plateau in the first place. And then when he sees a vision of riding horses, that seems like total Kirk, right? So it just, I don't know. And obviously you can't blame Arnold Drake for it because none of that had been really established yet. But it's still just in the hindsight of, decades of Trek canon, and especially with these characters, it just seems weird.
It does. It seems very weird, and it gets even weirder.
Yep.
It gets even weirder on the next page.
What the deuce?
What the deuce? What? Second panel. He's seeing 3 separate images of himself. Scotty is.
Yeah.
In different forms. One is a version of him with a hand in his pocket and the other hand playing with a yo-yo. And I assume he says 3 different descriptions. I assume this one is what he's calling me as a carefree chump.
Right.
So that's what carefree chumps do. They walk around with their hands in their pockets playing with yo-yos, doing nothing. Then there's a picture, a close-up of his face with devil horns and fire coming out of his mouth, and which is, quote, a devil. And then here's my rebuttal to Ian's assessment of Scotty's intelligence on the previous page. Scotty is doing a math problem on a chalkboard, and this is him being, in his own words, a fool. And on the chalkboard is 2 + 1 = question mark.
All right. Solve for A, or solve for question mark.
Planet question mark. So yeah, this is really bizarre to me.
Yeah. It is the because here it's definitely like before. It's all stuff that's definitely fanciful, but it all looks real. Even the B2 block, right? Like it's a real object. And even the witch, for that matter, it looks like a real person. But the Scotty breathing flames with devil horns, that just seems a little weird. And what is it trying to communicate, I think is what we should really be asking, right?
I think at this point now, this is just my own theory about this. Now, lest the listeners think that I'm being completely negative about this, I'm not saying that this is bad. I actually really like what I think the crystal is doing. And I think, and we'll find out later, I believe supports my theory, that what the crystal has no way to defend itself. We have to assume right now that it is some sort of a living organism, in the fact that it shot the pickaxe out of Scotty's hand in its own defense. Now, the only thing I think it can do here is it's using whatever powers it has to, overload Scotty's brain with these visions that I guess he finds offensive or abhorrent or frightening in other ways. So he's being frightened. He's seeing himself as a child, and then I would think that at least 2 of the 3 visions, the carefree chump and the fool, are 2 things that Scotty does not want to be. He's an intelligent guy. He's the chief engineer. He's a hard worker, so he's definitely not a carefree chump, and he's not a fool. Maybe those are 2 things that he is afraid of becoming. The devil, I guess, maybe he's is a good guy. He's seeing himself as evil, and he doesn't want to be that way.
Yeah. So and he's kind of an alcoholic. And true. So, sometimes you get that devil whiskey in you.
Yeah, or maybe he was, lighting his burps or something, and right. Flames were shooting out of his mouth. But at any rate,
Halloween party.
In the next panel, Scotty's brain overloads, and the crystal overwhelms him. So As weird as this sequence seems, and as strange as these images are, it kind of makes sense if you think about it that way. That it's a kind of a defense mechanism, and it's kind of messing with his mind to either knock him out or at least drive him crazy enough that it won't hurt the crystal anymore.
Right, or if you will, the psychocrystal.
Oh yes, well there you go. It's a psychocrystal.
Right, like like I was talking about earlier, not the Alfred Hitchcock movie sense of the word,
Right.
with Janet Leigh and all, but the psycho as in mind
psycho, yes, psychosis. Now this to me does actually feel kind of like something that we would see in Star Trek. To me, these crystals that drive you crazy definitely feel TOS.
Totally, yeah.
So definitely,
they're kind of this side of paradisey.
Yeah, exactly. So it's instead of being a plant that shoots spores in your face, it's a crystal that shows you visions, and I kind of like that premise. Character blemishes aside,
yeah,
it feels good. I enjoyed this part of the comic.
Yeah, me too.
I don't really have much else to bring up. If you want, do you have anything else before we move along?
No, just that I don't think that Scotty has gotten this much. Well, it's not screen time, page time.
Yeah,
in
he
a row?
definitely is getting a lot of play in this one.
I mean, this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 6 pages in a row of mostly Scotty.
Yeah, this is definitely a Scotty-centric issue, and it continues that way for a while. Too. There's a lot more Scotty in the next few pages. So,
speaking of,
Kirk has set off to find Scotty, and when he arrives, he finds Scotty unconscious on the ground, and winds up waking him up. And Scotty warns Captain Kirk not to look at the crystals, and proceeds to tell Kirk the story of what happens and how he was almost driven completely insane. So the two set off in search of Dr. McCoy, and concerned that McCoy might find the crystals and run into the same predicament. So they wind up arriving a little too late, and they find McCoy is laughing and acting, quote unquote, completely bonkers.
Yes.
So, what were you going to say?
I just like the way that Kirk, no, damn it. See, well, so it turned out it was Scotty delivering the line, but it seems like a very Kirk line in the way that it's got the dash between completely and bonkers. Like he's completely bonkers.
Yeah, maybe that's the way you write Shatner dialogue.
Right, exactly.
In the comic book.
As if every word is its own sentence.
Either hyphenate or commas, one of the two. So Kirk decides that he knows how to fix this problem and gives Dr. McCoy a shot to the jaw, knocks him to the ground, and somehow that brings him back to his normal self. And McCoy seems a bit relieved, and Kirk says that the crystals will fascinate Mr. Spock, and there's a little kind of a joke here at Spock's expense. Scotty says he's sort of an intelligent rock himself, which, again, I think should have been a McCoy line, but another attributed to the wrong character line. And so the three of them are back together.
You guys call yourself Spock's friends.
Yeah, come on.
You're just like talking crap about him behind his back.
Wrong. Even Kirk, too.
But, I know, man.
The three of them are back together, and in another bizarre move, set up camp for the evening. And we'll hold off on that. So in the middle of the night, Kirk wakes up and proceeds to attack Mr. Scott in his sleep, believing that Scotty had just attempted to kill him. So he's seeing some sort of visions of Scotty making an attempt on his life. So McCoy wakes up and fires something called a Narco-Pellet at Kirk that temporarily knocks him out for a short time. And they surmise that the crystals have, quote, rays of paranoia that they've used on the captain to induce these visions into his head. So Kirk shakes it off and orders Scotty to call the ship and have themselves transported back up, which I think they should have done long before now. But anyway, the crystals, in true Star Trek fashion, are able to jam their communicators and render them unable to communicate with the Enterprise. And next thing they know, one of the crystal beings from the teaser page approaches them, and Scotty tries to use his phaser, but the crystal creature fires a beam from his forehead and shoots the phaser out of Scotty's hand. So the crystal guy says his name is Izor, and he calls the landing party kidnappers and accuses Scotty of trying to kill one of their young ones with his pickaxe. So Kirk quickly surmises that the crystals that they were seeing are actually unborn or young forms of Izor's crystal people. And with that, Izor takes them prisoner. So we're going to stop here. And this is page 14 that we're stopping on, the end of this section. And
yeah. Can I just add one thing to that summary?
Sure, absolutely.
That I think because it's kind of a Chekhov's gun. No reference to the navigator, but the literary tool. Because in the very last panel there, Kirk drops his communicator.
Mm-hmm.
And correct. That's going to come up later.
Yep.
So I figured we should probably point that out.
Good call. Thank you for bringing that up. I don't know why I missed that one, but it is most certainly there. So, I think it's nice that we actually get a description, a kind of an explanation of what the title of the comic meant through this sequence. We find out that they actually do have some sort of mental powers.
Right, they psychoanalyzed them.
Yeah, and we even get more later on in the comic, so that's kind of cool too. But I think my biggest problem in this sequence is, why do they need to spend the night on the planet's surface? Why don't they just beam up and come back in the morning?
Yeah. Like there's no life there. Nothing's going to change, right? Just go up, beam back down to where you last were. If you're really worried about there being a continuous presence, just swap out with the next shift.
Yeah, exactly. Send some security guys down there to sleep in the tents. I don't know why that 3 of the senior officers on board shouldn't be sleeping in their own beds. Why are they stuck?
Just send some red shirts; they'll be fine.
Yeah, really. Yeah, they're expendable anyway. But so Narco-Pellets. So this is a new thing.
Yeah.
In the place of a hypo, I guess.
Yeah, it's I kind of like. So he looks like he's holding something when he deploys the Narco-Pellet in that panel, right? Because that doesn't look like just a really, really long finger, even though I do only count his thumb and 3 fingers, but that's just way too long to actually be his index finger. I feel like that he's actually like holding some sort of, like a blowgun, but not one that you blow into. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's something that just kind of I don't know. It doesn't seem to exude any gas or anything.
Mm-mm.
So it would seem to just like impact the skin and get absorbed that way.
Yeah, you're right. It really looks like a blowgun, but he's not actually blowing a dart out of it. That would have made sense if it was like a blowgun with like a dart that penetrated his skin. And I think the word pellet is what's throwing me off. Right.
Yeah.
You would think if it was a pellet, he'd have to ingest it in some way.
Yeah, and a Narco-Pellet, just so that we're clear, is not something that will make you a drug cartel runner.
Or someone who narcs on them.
No, absolutely not. But then it's also weird that in the next page he calls it a KO pellet.
Oh, interesting.
Which would I'm guessing he's saying to mean knockout pellet.
Yeah. The abbreviation for it. Yeah, that KO pellet will leave you woozy for a while. Sorry, but that evens the score for that punch you gave me.
Yeah, which true enough. Like Kirk, don't be a jerk. Don't punch McCoy.
Oh, hey, and Kirk has a great Fonzie impression here with his response to that. He's just "Ay." Now, on this very same page, in the fourth panel, which is in the lower left-hand corner, this may very well be one of the strangest lines I've read.
Are you talking the caption?
Yeah. So in the previous panel, I love the fact that Scotty says 3 to beam up, although he does say schedule 3 to beam up. I'm really not sure what the schedule part would mean, but anyway, they're waiting for the transporter to beam them up. And this little caption says, tensely, they wait for the rude, quote, fingers, unquote, of the transporter to lock in.
Yeah.
Rude fingers of the transporter. I don't even know what to make of that, honestly. I'm trying to think. Like I was thinking maybe they miswrote what the author wanted there. But I can't even think of what
maybe that part was written by Alberto Giolitti.
Oh,
and they had to translate it to English.
Oh, possibly. Rude fingers and
rude fingers.
Quotes.
Like the only thing that I think of with like rude fingers is some sort of like, just going to go there, like molestation or something like that. Like, stuff that you just like, you don't want to ever hear the word rude and fingers together.
Yeah,
and it's just, like, it's just weird.
It certainly is.
It sticks out. Like, even if the background of that caption hadn't been yellow, it still would have stuck out like a sore thumb, that caption.
It certainly would have.
Yeah, it was a little.
Yeah. Agreed. So now we have now that we're past that, we have the entrance of our buddy Izor here, and he is the multicolored crystal being that we pointed out in the teaser page. And is he beaming in? Does he just appear? Because there's a big
suddenly an Izor.
He's here all week.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. I would assume so, but then at the same time, later on as you get to learn these people, it would kind of seem like maybe that's not a good explanation. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves,
Fair
but
enough.
It just so with the future of the issue in mind, I'm just going to say that those lines and everything coming out of him is just trying to draw attention to him.
Okay, fair enough. Speaking of drawing attention to him, I may be reading way too much into this comic, but on the next panel, the big panel in the middle of the page, and actually on the bottom panel, you can very clearly see that Izor is wearing a headband that has a feather in it.
Yeah, now, and not a crystal feather.
No. So are we to assume that somewhere on this planet there are birds?
Even though
crystal birds?
Right, even though Spock said there is no life as we know it.
Exactly. And where did he get that feather from?
Yeah, I had that exact same thought. I mean, obviously the decoration is there to set Izor apart.
Yes.
From the other people of his kind later on, right? To set him as some kind of a leader or something like that. But it is unequivocally a feather.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And an ornate, possibly leather headband.
Yeah.
It is brown. Very weird. We could probably talk about why he would be wearing a headband in the first place for a while, but
Right.
It seems an odd choice. It almost makes him look as if he's supposed to be tribal
Yeah.
in a way.
Which, again, getting into the later on in the series, it kind of seems like they've got that kind of a society, but like it's how to put this, like it almost seems like Giolitti was trying to use a kind of cultural shorthand, right?
Yeah,
To communicate who he is and what his position is.
True. Yeah. Good point.
But that shorthand, while familiar to readers in 1975, doesn't make sense in the context of the story itself.
Gotcha. Yep. Understood. That makes perfect sense. Good explanation. So we find that Izor, being crystalline himself, is also able to shoot beams of light or lasers from his body.
Zam!
Yeah, like good sound effect there in that second panel. And so much like the small crystals that drove McCoy and Scotty crazy in previous pages can do, so can the adult. And they kind of go through a little bit of that here, letting us know that the little crystals were their offspring. And my mind went to the Horda. And it's another situation where humans don't recognize something that they consider a common inanimate object as offspring of a living being. So you have the silicon nodules that were the Horda's eggs, and then you have these little, faceted crystal lumps that are actually the offspring of these crystalline beings. And I don't know if they actually reproduce the same way humans do, but that might be a little uncomfortable. But I don't know.
Right.
Because those crystals were kind of big.
Yeah. There's one thing before we get on, because once we move on from here, we're outside of this sort of exploratory on the plateau thing.
Right.
Why didn't anyone break out a tricorder at any point?
Yeah, really. I don't even think they had one. Nobody's even got one, unless they were in the backpacks.
Yeah, which are mysteriously gone now. I guess they just left them on the ground?
At the campsite.
Yeah. It just, like, that's the one thing. Like, when Scotty is first approaching that crystal, or McCoy when he's approaching his crystal, or whatever, right? Like, you would be like, oh, a crystal, let me scan it. Right? Like, if nothing else, just get some scans.
Yes. And get them back to the Enterprise in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So that was weird. But on the other hand, had they done that, it's very likely that they would have just said, oh, hey, it's, a complex chain of carbon molecules or whatever crystal it is, right? Like, well, not complex. Crystals aren't complex. So a crystal, we're going back into the science here. A crystal is basically a substance where all of the molecules are aligned the same way. And so it's, like a diamond is just, carbon, but it's just carbon all in a row, basically. It's, it's all facing the same way and aligned the same way. So that would, going back to the very beginning of the issue when Spock says that there's some, complicated crystals down there. Well, a complicated crystal would be something notable, right? Because crystals definitionally are pretty uncomplicated. And so that's something that you would want to, like you don't see that sort of thing normally in nature. So maybe bring a tricorder. That's all I'm saying.
There you go. There you go. You would think that Spock would have reminded one of them as they got into the transporter. They go, whoa, whoa, whoa. You guys.
Tricorders, guys.
Hey, guys, seriously. Tricorder, one of you. At least Dr. McCoy, right? You would think. But no. But, in the defense of this passage that we just went through, I do really, really like the fact that they give you some insight into the physiology of the crystalline race.
Oh, totally.
And how they consume light for energy, and they can focus light into lasers, but being exposed to too much sunlight can kill them by overloading them, or they liken it to being force-fed until you cease to exist, right? I like that. I really think that was nice that they went, and they didn't give us a huge flashback sequence in order to tell us that. They summed it up in, 2 panels.
In fact, if I'm not mistaken, there's no flashback at all in this issue.
You were correct. I was going to mention that near the end, but there are no flashbacks in this Gold Key, which is a rarity.
Very rare.
Very rare.
Even just a couple issues back, we had a double flashback.
Yes. I think we ran overboard with these flashbacks, but
yeah, they're conserving them now.
Yeah. So, and not only is there no flashback in this Gold Key comic, there's also something else that's popping up here as part 2 of the comic begins on page 15. You do not normally get 2-page spreads in Gold Key. So
yeah, absolutely.
Is this may actually be the first one where we're getting a full 2-page panoramic shot of this underground area on the planet where the crystalline folks reside, which is really cool. I have to say I was surprised to see this because this it's something that I haven't seen before, and it's really cool panel. We'll talk about it in a minute as we get through this story bit here.
Yeah, I mean, just the one thing that I want to mention about it, it was so unusual that I switched. Normally I read it on my iPad, the issues, but this time I went to the computer because it had a wide screen so that I could see the double-page spread at a normal size.
Nice. So, yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about this page in a second. There's a captain's log here that starts off this part of the comic, and it says Captain's Log Stardate 1927.5. Mr. Spock's sophisticated crystals have turned out to be living things, and we are being marched to their underground civilization. So the captain and Mr. Scott and Dr. McCoy are being led by Izor down a long staircase into his underground area. Just before, as Ian said, we'll mention it again, Captain Kirk is able to drop his communicator, and no one notices that he's done it, so he's leaving it as a clue for the Enterprise to be able to track them down. And as the landing party is being taken into this cavern underground, they see a bunch of the crystalline people and some buildings that look a lot like shiny igloos. And Scotty remarks that it looks like somebody's idea of paradise. And they learn that the crystal people feed on light, and they are exchanging. They see a couple of them exchanging a plate of fire, looking at it as if it was some sort of food. Winds up being something for a dog, a crystalline dog. But Izor winds up leading the landing party to who he calls the President, and telling him that President is the only one who is able to deal with the type of death penalty crime that the landing party has committed. So Kirk, of course, attempts to explain that they are peaceful, and they are on a mission of peace, and they're exploring to the President, but the President dismisses Kirk's plea and sentences all 3 of them to death for the attempted killing of one of their offspring. And they are taken to a library instead of a prison, because apparently there is no real prison on this planet. There's no real crime, so they didn't see a need to build one. And meanwhile, Mr. Spock has beamed down to the surface to have a look around. And since they missed 2 of their scheduled radio contacts with the landing party, and he discovers the homing beam coming from Kirk's communicator that he drops on the ground before he was taken underground. So the ending part of this comic is quite lengthy, so I'm going to break here so that we can kind of go through it all in one
Good call.
piece. So back to the 2-page spread.
Yeah.
Back to the 2-page spread here. Lots to talk about here. So there's your painter.
Yeah.
Your painter is there.
Yep. In fact, I will now say she is there. Just based on the next page where we see the bowl of fire being handed and...
Oh, right.
You know,
the crystalline dress.
Yeah, it seems to be what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, otherwise it's like it's the same person from that teaser page.
Yep. And
you've got like the bard who's not sat just on the other side of the canvas, but has a couple admirers.
Yeah, a couple of hippy-dippy admirers. No, they're laying on the ground. No blankets, of course, but it looks almost like an artist enclave. Yeah,
like a commune.
Pretty neat. And you've got let's see, 4 or 5 or so of these igloo-looking structures, and there's a bunch of purple-looking ones in the background. There could be more.
Yeah, I think they're just meant to be ones that are in the background.
Yeah, so we're getting the idea that there could be a whole huge society living here underground. Yeah. I found the staircase that they're descending to be interesting looking.
Yeah.
It definitely
the perspective on it is a little off. But...
It is. Yeah. It definitely looks like it's carved. It's not a natural formation.
Right, exactly.
But it looks to be made of stone, and it's not solid underneath. It looks like a thin staircase with nothing underneath that's supporting it. So strange.
Yeah, it is strange, but I just wanted to point out the how to describe it, but it's the thing that kind of dominates the shadow of that staircase with all the little spindles and everything.
Yeah, some sort of potentially a plant of sorts.
Yeah, that I just wanted to point that out because you were mentioning earlier, like, you know, how there's no relation to the crystalline entity, but that kind of looks crystalline entity-ish. I'm just going to throw that out there.
It does. You're right. Good call. Yeah, it does. It's like a small version. Maybe it's the embryonic form.
Yeah, like a spore or something.
Entity. Yeah, and there's another thing that I just really quickly, if you look up by the landing party when they're coming down the stairs, there's some very curiously placed torches.
Yeah.
They're really high up on that mountainside. I mean, if they're supposed to provide light, they're a little high up for that. Aren't they?
Yeah. So I had a thought about that, actually.
Okay.
Do you see on the very right of the page in the middle, there's a column in the foreground, kind of light pinkish? Yep. And there's one of those things as well on the column. But the way that it almost looks like it's not so much on fire as it is like exhausting. Like it's some kind of gas.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. That was just I had that thought when I was looking at it because I had that same thought where it was like, oh, it's not really lighting anything, is it?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it's a good point. Looks like it's naturally attached to the wall. So potentially, or to the column rather. So yeah, that's possible. Good call. Let's see. Oh, next page. Second panel. I love the fact that they have a crystalline dog.
Yes,
I love that.
He eats fire.
And notice
literally eats fire.
It does. It literally eats fire, and I think its front legs suffer from a little bit of a. How do you?
A lack of joints.
Yeah, good call. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do like the fact that they, just happen to put that in there. It was not necessary, but it's a good little bit of extra color in the comic.
Right, and it kind of makes these people sympathetic.
Yes,
to the reader,
they have,
or makes the reader sympathetic to them. I should say.
Yeah, and when you can see their plight too. I mean, these are aliens that have arrived on their world uninvited, and one of them did attempt to take a pickaxe to one of your babies. So
right, like I would be upset if I had a baby.
Yeah,
and someone tried to take a pickaxe to us.
Absolutely, and the president. I think. The death penalty may be a little extreme, but the president's just doing what he thinks is right, and the president is here on the last panel of this page, and he's another one of the crystal entities that has some distinctive, I guess, articles of clothing, if you will, a kind of a neck piece and this strange looking tiara crown sort of thing.
Almost looks like a fleur-de-lis.
Yes, almost. And I kind of like that they had to give him some adornment around his neck and on his head to make him look presidential.
Absolutely.
So a nice way to set him apart from everyone else. So who the main crystalline beings are. So you've got Izor and the president because they have their own individual, character, pieces, their little headbands and their colorations, where the other ones were all pretty much generic one color.
Of course, we don't know anything about their family structures, so I wonder, if Izor, if he had a kid, and the kid was named Garth, would he be Garth of Izor?
I knew you were going to go there.
Sorry.
How do you feel about these crystalline? How do you feel about their anti-science culture? Because we get a little bit of an explanation as to why they are afraid of the aliens and the technology that they potentially can bring with them.
Well, I'm not, they seem pretty happy the way they are, but Kirk explicitly asks Izor, why do you feel that way about science? And Izor says, what need have we of it? The purpose of science is to make beings understand one another. Wrong. That is not the purpose of science. The purpose of science is to understand the universe better. It has, yes, you can use science to understand each other better because we are part of the universe. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, the purpose of science is so that we, the consciousness of the universe, can learn more about itself. Itself being the universe. So this was a scene that I really wish Spock had been there for, so that Spock could have made that counter argument.
Agreed. Yeah, Spock's absence in this has really set this scene, or even set the whole tone. Because if he had been here the whole time, I think a lot of this could have easily been avoided. Totally.
And then it was funny that we both had that thought, because just panels later, here comes Spock.
Yeah, and we'll wait till we get there to go through the resolution of this. But I have to say, the president, for somebody who doesn't deal with crimes a lot, he's really good at pointing at people.
Yeah.
I mean,
it seems like
page 17, he's doing some serious pointing, man.
Yeah. Out of 4 panels that he appears in, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so 8. Okay, so it's about a 50% pointing ratio. And about half of his appearances, he's pointing. Yes.
That's his skill. He's great at it. Now, again, just before we move on to the next part, I mean, again, another questionable landing party choice here. Spock beams down to the planet surface by himself. Now,
Who's
We've
in
seen
command?
Spock do stuff like this before, but it's clearly pointed out that the landing party has missed 2 of their scheduled check-ins. So that means there's something wrong. So
Right.
wouldn't Starfleet policy dictate that a security detail would come down? In fact, haven't they even said in prior episodes of the show that if the ship doesn't hear from the landing party, security will come looking for them?
Mm-hmm. And then there's Savik's made up regulation.
Yeah.
No flag officer shall beam down to a hazardous situation without an unarmed escort.
Yes. So,
or without an armed escort, you know what I mean?
Very, very poor choice. And I really wish that they would have just included even a red shirt.
Right, especially because Spock, being the logical one, would have thought that through. You would expect.
Definitely. He would not have been as impulsive. If this was Kirk going down by himself, I would say, okay, hubris is kicking in. But I feel very strange about that move. And I mean, I can see Spock, he's going down, he's looking around, and he's doing a little bit of sleuthing here to try to find them. But I really wish that they would have made it a little
buddy
more.
System.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I guess we'll move on here to the finale of this. And this is a bit of a long one. We're starting on page 19 and going all the way through to the end. So hold on to your hats here. Spock beams down to the planet, as I said, and he's discovered the homing beacon coming from Kirk's communicator that he dropped and left behind. And it eventually leads him to the entrance to the crystalline people's cavern. And the leader, we find out that the leader of the crystalline people knows that Spock is there and brings Kirk and Scotty and McCoy to a room that has a bunch of periscopes in it so that they can kind of look up on the surface and watch the little crystals do their job on Spock. But, of course, Spock being a Vulcan, he's unaffected by the crystal's power because, of course, he has no emotions. Never mind the fact that he has a human half. But the president dispatches some guards to grab a hold of Mr. Spock and bring him down into the cave so that he can also be sentenced to death along with the rest of the landing party. So just as the Enterprise crew is about to be executed, some crystalline guards arrive at the palace and yell that there is something called a Slourda.
Yeah, I went with Slourda.
Slourda, Slourda, approaching. And turns out that the Slourda is the reptilian crystal being that we saw on the cover and on the teaser page.
Oh my God.
Hmm?
Sorry to interrupt. I just had a eureka moment.
Okay.
The sound effect, the EARC or EOC,
Yeah.
that the Slourda makes, you could totally assign the Godzilla sound to that.
Oh, you could. Yeah, nice.
Right.
Uh-oh, we've got a little homage to Godzilla here. So, and speaking of
sorry to interrupt, but I just had to get that out.
That's fine. It was perfect timing. Speaking of Godzilla, the Slourda smashes through the wall, the Great Cavern Wall, and just begins trampling all over the place and stepping on the peace citizens and destroying their buildings, just like Godzilla would do. So the guards, as we saw on the teaser page, this is where the guards start throwing the spears at the Slourda, and it's not really dissuaded too much. It looks a little annoyed, not exactly hurt, but it kind of wanders a little bit away in defense. So Izor tells Kirk that the Slourda is now immune to their mental powers, and over the course of time, the Slourdas have become immune to it. So there's nothing that they can do really to stop the Slourda from destroying them. And Kirk, in an offer of diplomacy, offers to teach the Crystal people how to kill the Slourda in exchange for staying their death sentence. And in desperation, the president agrees. So Spock devises a plan to use the crystals, the babies, from the surface to focus mental energy and kill the Slarda. So this is a strange one to me because they're so defensive of these infant crystals. But Izor brings one of the infant crystals down.
Here you go.
Here's the baby, and they. This is where Izor explains that the little baby crystals have more potent mental energy in them. They seem to lose that mental potency as they mature into the crystalline humanoids. So they need the little ones in order to pull this off. So the Enterprise landing party sets off into the large cave in pursuit of the Slarda, and when it sees them, it starts to attack them. So Spock has an idea to use the mental energy of themselves, their mental patterns, as a focus through the crystal in order to attack the Slarda, since they have alien concepts in their head, such as science, that the crystalline people don't have, and it's something that they feel the Slarda might not be immune to already. So turns out to be a good idea. So the energy of Spock's thoughts, he begins thinking of things like complex formulas and the like, and they are magnified through the crystal, and the Slarda winds up falling over dead after being blasted by Spock's...
Gerzemp.
Yes, perfect. So, of course, the president thanks them and stays their execution, and Spock, upon their exit, leaves them with a supply of science textbooks so that they can defend themselves using new mental concepts that the rest of the Slarda are not immune to. Little prime directive question here, but anyway, so let's finish it up here before we jump backwards. So they're back aboard the Enterprise. Kirk asks Spock if he feels guilty about ending the innocence of the crystal people, and Spock replies, "Not at all. I see no charm in a world that tries to destroy killer dragons with bolts of poetry and music, Captain."
Da, 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 da.
Wow. Okay, anyway, before we even begin to approach that line of dialogue with Spock, which that's cringeworthy.
Yeah, that is the end of the issue.
That is the absolute end of the issue. So let's roll back quickly to page 19. Real quickly, I love the fact that they have periscopes.
Yeah.
They're not in a submarine.
Right, no. But they're definitely submarine periscopes with little crystalline bottoms.
But yeah, with crystalline bottoms. So, okay, so submarines have periscopes because submarines move around underwater. So the perspective and view of the periscope in the submarine is not fixed, right? They can use it, but these periscopes, since they are protruding through land and crust of the planet and up into the surface, that means all they can really do is rotate around. So they can only see one thing. It's not like, you can see the entire planet surface through these things. So Spock would have to be in a very specific location for them to see Spock through these periscopes, right?
Right. So in the defense of these periscopes, so Spock was following the trail of Kirk's communicator. Kirk dropped it right by where Izor had found them and was, mustering them away. So presumably it's the same periscopes that spotted, Kirk and Scotty and McCoy in the first place. And so, it's just, the communicator is kind of the thing that sells it, that says that this is, in fact, the same area. And so in the field of view of the periscope. So that I'm okay with, although I do fully acknowledge the impracticality of just having a fixed periscope like that.
Fair enough. So, the young crystal's not being able to read Spock's mind because he doesn't have emotions.
Okay, so Spock has emotions.
He does. We've seen
we are crystal clear about that, no pun intended. second of all, it's weird that, like, the crystal's not probing his emotional weaknesses. All I see are some strange patterns. But then, of course, geometric patterns. That's all the crystal probe can find in Mr. Spock's head. Ha ha. Sure, Vulcans have no emotions. Ha ha ha. I told you that Spock is practically a crystal himself. Ha ha ha. Like, can I just say it? You assholes. Like, you guys call yourselves Spock's friends, and you were just, like, talking smack just the moment that he appears, but because he's out of hearing range.
And
just like, God, that is so out of character.
Can I say that the first line that you read about the geometric patterns, that was Kirk saying that. Wow. Yeah. Now McCoy says the second line, the second set of dialogue that you said. So, and then that, okay, I can see McCoy making a joke like that. But Kirk, wow. And then Scotty is making like a circular motion with his finger.
Yeah, like he's doing he's crazy the dum-dum thing, yeah.
Yeah.
And the level of laughter and everything, it just seems really mean-spirited, and that just really rubbed me the wrong way.
Exactly. There are several ha-has in there, 3 of them to be exact.
Yeah.
Ha-ha, ha-ha-ha, and ha-ha-ha. So they are laughing at Spock's expense, and I would say that definitely comes off as mean.
Yeah.
Unnecessarily mean, especially since Spock is coming to save them. You'd think they'd be grateful.
Right. Yeah.
They've been sentenced to death.
Right. Literally sentenced to death.
And unfortunately, Ian, this is, and as you know, this is not the last dig at Spock that we're going to get in this issue.
No.
On page 24, this one rubbed me the wrong way, where the Slarda is coming after Kirk, and Kirk is trying to egg Spock on. I don't want to use the word egg again, but he's trying to get Spock motivated to get this crystal weapon working. And he tells Spock to start throwing some of that egghead thinking at the beast.
Yeah.
Egghead.
Yeah. So okay, so like, that's also mean. But then props to Spock. He starts thinking like, E equals MC squared. Although when I was reading this, I was wondering, well, okay, so the speed of light is, oh boy, if I'm remembering correctly, 2.9998 meters per second, or no, 2.998 times 7, or times 10, or to the 7th or 8th power meters per second, right? So, but it's a constant, right? But like, so he wouldn't know that as Einstein's equation, right? I mean, he probably would, but like, he would probably, having grown up on Vulcan, think of whatever the Vulcan equivalent is, which is probably, E equals MC squared, yes, but C would equal a slightly different constant, that slightly different only in the sense that it would use different crap, what's the word? I just suddenly lost it. Slightly different units. And, because like, they wouldn't have meters on Vulcans, right? They'd have, well, not kilograms, that's Klingon, but you know what I mean, right? Like, so the number would be a little bit off, but it would be pointing at the same thing, you know, once you do the division. So I don't know. That it was cool that he thought of E equals MC squared, but I also thought, well, you know, you had a chance here to show that Spock was an alien, right? And to insert something into the canon. And then the simplest of chemical formulas.
Yeah.
Sulfuric acid, H2SO4. That's not the simplest.
No,
I can think of one using two of those elements that's even simpler.
Well, yeah. Again, not the most scientifically accurate of comic books.
Yeah, sulfur monoxide. Just going to say it. SO. That's its chemical formula. Like, just. But. H2SO4. Yeah, okay, that would have been, you know, something science-y, right? So that would have been that, you know, it fulfills the story, but it's just that Spock calls it the simplest of chemical formulas.
Right.
That just kind of rose me the wrong way.
Inaccuracy.
Yeah.
But followed by a really cool panel of the Slourda writhing in pain and dying. I really like the second panel here where it's screaming. That looks really cool, and it's got a really interesting looking sound effect in it.
Grzump.
Yep. Very cool. I kind of like that face. Kind of looks like Grimlock from the Transformers a little bit. With his big wide mouth open. But
me Grimlock, not lizard. Me Grimlock crystal.
Perfect. Perfect. But yeah, another really abrupt ending and resolution to this comic. I mean,
I thought this might have been the most abrupt that we've even seen so far.
You could be right there. It's at least tied for it. I mean, this last page, I mean, there's the epilogue.
They had 3 panels.
Yeah, it's that's the wrap.
3 panels for the coda and 1 panel for just the crew to, like, you know, so like there's 2 panels for the resolution with the psychocrystals, and then just 1 panel for, you know, the crew to talk about what they just went through. It's just like, wow. And they're not even big panels.
No, not at all. It's super fast wrap up on this one. And the shame of it all is that it ends with that really, really out of character line from Spock.
Yeah. Spock, the musician.
Yeah.
Let's not forget. Right?
Exactly.
And that was not like, you know, a later edition. That was in like what Charlie X was when we saw Spock first playing the lyre.
Yep. Exactly.
You know, like we know that he has an incredibly poetic heart.
Extreme. So yeah, it's again, as you said earlier, lots and lots of out of character moments in this issue, and this is for me, this is one of the biggest ones because that line of dialogue just completely does not fit Spock in any way, shape, or form. So
yeah, it really doesn't. But
a but.
Well, don't. This is where the episode goes. Was that enough to knock it off of an essential vote for you?
So now I attempted to write up some notes on thoughts about whether or not this was essential, and I had a hard time finding a reason to call this essential. In fact, the crystalline race themselves should have been enough for me to put it over the edge, but the fact that they didn't even come up with a name for themselves.
Yeah. But a cool logo.
Now you could call them the Psychocrystals, but that they never in this issue anywhere state that the name of the race. So they're not called the Psychocrystals. That's just what the issue is called. So, you know, I love the fact that they went there and they created this crystalline race and gave them some interesting backstory and gave us some physiological rundown of how they work. They since they're non-humanoids, they're made of different materials. They went ahead and gave us a little bit of a description of how they function, which I thought was great. But unfortunately, I don't think that I can call this issue essential. It doesn't bring anything really new. I mean, Dr. McCoy uses the that Narco-Pellet thing, but I don't think that's enough on its own. It doesn't bring anything really to the Trek universe. Aside, I mean, the Crystal people should be it, but again, like I said, they're not. They didn't bother to name them, and I just don't feel like I have a feeling we're never going to see them again.
Yeah, so, I think that's a pretty good bet.
If we see them again, I will put this caveat. If we see them again, I will retroactively give this an essential vote. But Fair enough. It stands now, I have to go non-essential.
Fair enough. So I'm just going to get to it and say that this is non-essential. Okay. But I thought that it was a really interesting story with a lot of potential, but ultimately that potential was unfulfilled.
I agree with you.
And mix in with that the fact that they just seemed to get the characters all mixed up, made it so that, like, it was kind of eclectic in whether or not it felt like a Star Trek story or not.
Yeah, agreed.
And the pendulum of that ended up swinging too much onto the side of not feeling like Star Trek, and because of that,
I agree with you.
It gets the non-essential.
Yeah, the story had a lot of definite Trek elements in it. I can totally see the crystals that affect your mind and drive you crazy. Fits TOS perfectly. Even the crystalline beings I could see in a Trek episode, but like I said, like you said, it's just too disjointed. The characters are all wrong, and it winds up being confusing, I think.
Right.
So,
I mean, if you really want to read it. You'll probably still find some enjoyment. I still found some enjoyment in it. I'm sure you did too.
But you won't miss anything by skipping it.
Right. And one last thing. The crystal people, I mean, that in and of itself is not new to Star Trek. Like, we've got the Tholians.
Yep.
Right? But like I was saying at the beginning of this episode, it kind of lent itself to a lack of imagination on Giolitti's part in the way that he portrayed them. Because the Tholians, well, okay, in the original series, in fairness, the only thing you got to see was the head of Cesrine, I think was the name of the Tholian. But, in Enterprise, we learned that they're like these kind of arachnidy, multi-limbed, like, but that kind of imagination, though, is what I wanted to see in these crystal people.
Yep.
Exactly. I didn't want to just see them be bipedal, humanoid-looking crystals with really skinny joints.
I agree. There's an opportunity to make them look less humanoid.
Yeah, more alien, if you will.
And they didn't go for it. But
yeah,
such is life with Gold Key, and a double non-essential.
And I the crystal people aside, I really got to give Giolitti props. This was a consistently solid issue in terms of the art. Like it was really, really good. I just, the character design of the crystal people, bad, but everything else in it, completely. The characters all looked great. The monster looked great. The landscapes looked great. It was really, really good artistically, and like I said earlier, the the story was really interesting as a seed, but just, wasn't well executed. So I don't know. It pains me every time I give a non-essential vote.
As it should. You shouldn't hand them out lightly. Either way, essentials and non-essentials shouldn't be handed out lightly. There should be some thought behind it. So, all right. Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of the Tricorder Transmissions, and we'll be back again soon with coverage of another Gold Key Comics issue. And in the meantime, if you would be so kind as to head over to our Facebook, facebook.com/Tricorder Transmissions, or our Twitter, TTT_pod, or even our own website, and let us know what you think. It's the tricordertransmissions.com. Let us know what you think of the show. If you want to talk a little bit back and forth about this issue or any of our other issues, we're always happy to hear from you. And if you want to reach out to us personally, I am on Twitter at J_BENJ. And Ian, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter as well at Ian128K, as in 128 kilobytes.
Excellent. And if you feel so inclined, if you'd run over to iTunes and leave us a review, we would love to hear the feedback and what you think, and help rate us so that other people can find our podcast more easily and be enticed to listen to it along with the rest of you. So thanks a lot for listening to the show, and we look forward to being with you again next time.
Indeed.
Hi there, thanks again for listening. If you're cruising the galaxy looking for even more Trek talk, why not visit our good friends Bill and Dan over at TrekGeeks.com? They've got a great podcast that covers a wide range of Star Trek topics, so you're sure to find something you'll love. And if you're in the mood for some awesome tunes, then you really need to head over to 5yearmission.net. The guys are writing a song for every episode of the original series, and each one is absolutely brilliant. So that's TrekGeeks.com and 5yearmission.net. Check them out today.